Honorable Minister, over to you.
All right, thank you, P.S. Mangwana. Thank you, members of the Fourth Estate, for coming. Also, thank you, Honorable Ziambi, for coming. Are you ready now?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is Zimbabwe's position on the European Union Election Observer Mission final report for the year 2023. The government of the Republic of Zimbabwe takes note of the misleading and biased European Union Election Observation Mission for the year 2023 in terms of the harmonized elections, which seeks to impinge Zimbabwe's democratic processes. The report focuses on a closed episode of our national political cycle, and Zimbabwe is now at the height of implementing His Excellency President E.D. Mnangagwa's development agenda. However, it is prudent to underscore the factual shortfalls of the European Union EOM final report, as it seeks to misrepresent the government's adherence to the demands of our constitution in ensuring that the harmonized elections was free and fair. The entire election fulfilled the tenets of our robust national democracy. The government is fully aware of the European Union's election observation mission's irregular nocturnal meetings with opposition political players outside conventional election observation parameters. We also know that the European Union disbursed campaign funds to a particular opposition party in violation of the Political Parties Finance Act, and we also have substantial evidence of their clandestine operations with other election observer missions for the purpose of manipulating their reports in order to discredit the election outcome. At the same time, the government of Zimbabwe is aware of the colonial traditional reactionary aspersions of those perennially inclined to subvert the will of our people by misrepresenting facts about Zimbabwe's political environment before, during, and after the elections. Section 93 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe provides for the legal processes to be followed in the event that there are election disputes. However, after the announcement of the election results, there was no legal challenge to the process or the outcome of the elections, which gave legitimacy to the status quo. The outcome and conclusion of the elections was decided by the people of Zimbabwe on the 23rd and 24th of August 2023 elections. The adoption of the patriotic provisions in the Criminal Codification and Reform Act is in line with strengthening our national security interest. The amendment is also consistent with our sovereign privilege as any equal actor within the international community. The Cyber and Data Protection Act supports Zimbabwe's fulfillment of international law in combating cyber crimes and focuses on safety and security of citizens in the cyberspace. This law does not interfere with what the report refers to as infringement of social media and digital rights of the citizenry. As for the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, it did not get presidential assent, resulting in its referral back to to Parliament. Therefore, its perceived contentious provisions are still proposals. The PVO bill cannot be cited as a restrictive piece of legislation when it does not even exist. Further to this, the report suggests that prosecution of criminality of the members of political players translates to political persecution. However, no one is above the law, and our law will never be selectively applied to exonerate criminality. Being a political player does not provide one with the privilege of immunity. Like any other modern democracy, the independence and integrity of Zimbabwe's judiciary is sacrosanct, as opposed to the maligning allegations of the Observer Mission in terms of their final report. The government of Zimbabwe condemns the unwarranted attack on the entire legal framework of the elections as it relates to the constitutional mandate of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission in the running of elections in Zimbabwe, Parliament's law-making prerogative and its independence with respect to the cited amendments. The delimitation process is spelled out in terms of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The independence and transparency of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and the efficient administrative function of the entire election life cycle by ZEC. To this end, ZEC complied with its constitutionally demanded duties in promoting voter registration, voter verification, and voter education, which produced an inclusive, credible, free, and fair outcome. It must also be reiterated that the civil society and all social movements in Zimbabwe enjoy the constitutional benevolence of the freedom of association and expression. This is a prevailing reality which profoundly contradicts with the report's false projection of a restricted political environment in Zimbabwe in the run-up to the elections. And contrary to the claims by the report, the government of Zimbabwe continues to ensure that the national broadcaster, the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, affords all political players fair airplay as required by the law. The government has intensified media liberalization through licensing of new media, radio, and TV broadcasters. And instead, also government condemns the weaponization of some private media players for hostile and polarizing reportage in favor of a certain opposition political party, which is perpetually purporting to be operating in an unfair playing field. The rights and freedoms of all journalists is constitutionally governed. To this end, there have been reforms in the media sector, which includes but not limited to the repeal of the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We now have the Freedom of Information Act, and under the new legal and operational circumstances, the issue of a restricted flow of information does not arise. The report also maliciously omits that under the policy of leaving no one and no place behind, the Second Republic introduced the youth quota and extended the women's quota in Parliament. The introduction also of the women's quota in councils is another progressive step towards inclusive participation and promotion of devolution. The new cabinet also reflects the inclusion of the youth and women in terms of the demographic dividend in the affairs of the state. This will add value to the cause of sustainable nation building in advancing our socio-economic development as Zimbabwe continues to protect its sovereignty, dignity in the community of nations. I thank you. So I will allow Honorable Ziambi to respond first, then I'll summarize and enrich or add some more content.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The first question where you asked that the report by SADC and the EU report, I agree they are very similar. The AU is substantially different from the two, but the SADC one and the EU report was written by the same person. If you go through them, you can almost tell that the way that they were drafted, people who were in the same room, and one produced this report and the other one produced this report, but basically it was more or less the same, and we have said it even when we got the preliminary report that we picked that these reports were substantially done by perhaps one consultant who wrote it for them, and the people who were consulted, the issues that they were raising, they followed a similar pattern, and we agree with that there was largely an influence. That's the reason why you saw in the minister's statement he spoke about how they tried to fund other political parties and influence the outcome of the election in the direction that they wanted. In terms of where it leaves Zimbabwe in terms of its re-engagement and debt clearance roadmap, we believe that our elections were done in terms of our laws as they are, and our elections were very peaceful, very credible. I was in the collation room in the National Command Center where all the political parties were represented. Not even a single election result from constituencies was disputed by all that were there, save that one party's representative said that he was told that you must not sign for the results, and therefore he could not sign that it was a true reflection of what had happened. And secondly, like what the minister said, Section 93 of the Constitution is very clear where the results are disputed. And this is one election where nobody challenged any result. And they agreed to all the council results. Hence, we found out that all the councillors were sworn in. They agreed to the National Assembly results. Hence, all the MPs were sworn in. Not even a single one said, no, I'm contesting these results. So we believe that our process of engagement in terms of debt clearance, our meetings are scheduled. The Minister of Finance is leading that on part of government, and we are going to meet everyone who is involved. Part of it was not, the terms and references were never that the opposition must win for the negotiations to continue. So I think we'll discuss with them, put all the facts as they are, and implore them that we must continue where we left the negotiations before the general elections. And I will leave my colleague minister to add on other issues. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ziambi. He has already covered almost every aspect of your questions. And as I already indicated, that the EU observer mission was involved in clandestine operations and meetings with other observer missions. And in terms of the engagement and re-engagement, we remain guided by the reality that we are a friend to all and an enemy to none in terms of re-engagement and engagement. But of importance is that what Honorable Zimbabwe has highlighted, that there are legal parameters that should be followed in terms of Section 93 of the Constitution in the event that there are any election dispute outcomes. But at the same time, the most important thing is that our elections were held within the context of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which is the supreme law in Zimbabwe. But at the same time, to emphasize to Kolisani that one of the most important things that we should never allow is to allow misrepresentation and misleading reports by any observer mission which seek to undermine the sovereignty of this country. This is a democratic country. I thank you.
Take feedback from the observers. If it's fair, we will see whether things need to be refined. And we'll refine, because there is no perfect democracy. Every country is trying to improve its processes. So those things which are fair and legit would be dealt with. Those things which are outrageous, interfering, and intrusive would be rejected. But that's not my press conference. Honorable Ministers.
Okay, over to you, Honorable Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. I think I want to thank PS for the response. And let me preface my response as follows. Observers come to observe. So if observers meet a group of people who didn't follow the due process of ensuring that they satisfy the requirements of the law in terms of their gatherings, they will simply observe and take note of what that particular individual has said. Likewise, if they meet a group of people that are complaining that the other side is doing this, whether that complaint borders on an illegality on the act of the other party, they will simply note it. That is what observation is all about. When you are writing an examination and you are said, go and observe, you don't go and critically think. You make an observation and you say, okay, I observed the goats got out of the crow, went to the field, they fed, then lastly they went to the watering hole and drank water and went back. You don't say, no, that when they were grazing, I don't think the pastures were good enough for them. That is now not what observation is. So we, as government, we are actually surprised that observers believe they are monitors or they are here to change our laws. I'll give you a very good example that they critique the delimitation process. For all I know, CCC never complained about it, not even in courts. But ZANU-PF, through some activists, we did. MDC Monzora, they did. They were very happy with it. But come the election time, they were the ones now going to election observers to say the way the delimitation was done was particularly wrong. The process of notifying the police if you want to have gatherings, if you go and check in our Hansard, the opposition participated heavily in coming up with MOPO. In fact, at the conclusion of that debate, one of the vice presidents of the opposition stood up and thanked the government for the manner in which they were all inclusive in coming up with that law. But fast forward to election, it's now there in the EU report. So we are saying, in terms of our laws, as they are, in terms of the conduct of the whole process, we believe that this was one of the best elections that we have had. And on election day, it was very peaceful. During the campaign period, it was very peaceful. But you can never have a process where two people or more than two people are in contestation, where you do not have skirmishes here and there. There is no such thing that can happen, even in football. Sometimes you see, even in the field of play, players trying to beat each other, but when the final whistle goes, you find them hugging each other. So we believe our elections were very peaceful, free, credible, and what government is seized with now, like what the minister said, we are now looking at the development agenda, and you can see the president is going to other countries to engage them, to ensure that we progress with our vision 2030 and our mantra that no one should be left behind, and also our mantra that we had these elections, but it's us Zimbabweans, all of us sitting here, who build our country, not foreigners. So the message that I want to leave is, we are now at the stage where we believe that we take note of the reports, we take note of the observations, we will consider those observations that we believe will enhance our democracy and make our electoral processes better. But at this stage, government is now focusing on ensuring that we deliver on the promises in our national development strategy. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Siambi. But to Kolisani, why do you think we have elections in Zimbabwe? Do you think we are having elections in order to satisfy European Union's aspirations? We have elections in Zimbabwe in order to strengthen our democracy. But also of importance is the historical perspective related to elections. It is the black majority of Zimbabweans who fought, who contributed for one man, one vote. I'm sure you are aware of that. That even other European countries were also part of the Berlin Conference in terms of the scramble of Africa to undermine democratic institutions in Zimbabwe. So I wanted you to know that we do it for our own good, and in particular as Zimbabweans, and if I will also refer to as ZANU-PF, which was one of the key organizations that brought about the democratic space that we currently enjoy. So we do elections in order to consolidate and strengthen our democracy, in order to support self-determination, but not in order to please the European Union. This is a constitutional obligation. Thank you.